So good. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for jumping on. It looks like the numbers of attendees are increasingly getting bigger. We love this. Welcome to Beyond Date Night. As you are logging on, we'd love for you to just jump on the chat and let us know where you are dialing in from. So if you could just take a moment and share, where are you geographically in this world? And if you have children yet, the ages of your children, if you are expecting, when your due date is. We'd love to see who's out there tonight. And we'll get started in just a few minutes. We'll give a little bit of time for everybody to show up. Yay, Michigan. 3 months old. I love that. Congrats. Excited to have you here. Hi, Denver. Yay, congrats. Expecting in May. So exciting. Wow, we are all over the map today. Long Beach, California, 17-month-old son, expecting baby girl. Congrats. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, we're so excited to have you. We're just giving a few moments until we get a good attendee list. It looks like people are still jumping in right now. You are at the right place, Beyond Date Night. And just as you can see, you're probably checking out the chat. If you could do us a favor and let us know where you are dialing in from geographically, if you have children, how old they are, and if you're expecting, when is your due date. Hi, New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey too. So nice to see you.
Me too.
Yay.
Hi, New Jersey.
San Francisco. Lots of expecting. Some older children. Welcome. I know there's I think the challenges happen from old to young. They're just different kinds of challenges. So welcome to the session. 13 weeks postpartum. Hawaii. Wow, congrats. Chicago, St. Louis. This is amazing. Truly a national audience. We're so excited to have you. All right, our numbers are still going up a little bit, so I'm just going to give it about one more moment before we jump on. We're so excited to kick this off in just a sec.
Gretchen, you're muted.
Thank you so much. Good thing I'm a emphatic talker here.
Something's going on.
I'm doing my groove. I'm so excited to have you all. I was just about to say we have people from all across the U.S. Expecting, postpartum, in the infant and toddlers, and then all the way up into the early childhood and teens. It's really exciting to know that you're all interested in what we have to say tonight. So let's get started and welcome everyone as you're jumping on. Let's get to this slide here. Yay! On behalf of Hatch and Vivvi, we're so excited to welcome you tonight. We absolutely love Hatch, an amazing partner to us at Vivvi, and really an incredible source of truth for moms to be, and families out there in the world. We are thrilled to get started on what we know will be a very interesting and engaging conversation on a super important topic. Looks like all of us are really interested in it, with a very special speaker, Dr. Christin Drake, who you will learn and hear from more momentarily. I'm Gretchen Richer. I'm the Director of Family Experience at Vivvi, and I'm also the son of a 4-year-old Noah, and I'm here in New Jersey. And Vivvi as an organization is on a mission to reinvent childcare and early learning for today's families, whether that be in our brick and mortar campuses in New York City, specializing in learning and care for ages 6 weeks to 5 years, and then nationally our in-home program, which really takes everything about our school model, including our teachers, and places them inside your home, expanding our coverage to literally meet families wherever they are. Before I turn it over to Christin, I'm going to share a couple program logistics and then we'll dive in. If this is your first webinar, welcome. I'll give you the lay of the land. If not, this is probably going to be really familiar to you. Tonight we have a presentation. So we're going to be looking at some slide decks, which in addition to our wonderful speaker who will be definitely giving us some great resources. We are going to be checking out some important information visually, which is great because there'll be a ton of useful advice and takeaways up on that screen. And we'll do so in that manner for about 30 to 40 minutes. During that presentation, I'm also going to bring up a lot of the questions based on the wonderful submissions by you, the audience. That said, the chat function is open now, so you're welcome to populate that with questions at any time, but we'll definitely have some time at the end designated just for Q&A. And then finally, as we have a sense of looking over this agenda, I really wanted to share a few thoughts about the topic tonight from the Vivvi perspective. So tonight we are going to talk about the crucial importance of intimacy. And yes, we're getting a little PG-13 and C-17 and talking about sex and why you might be initially scratching your head as to how this is relative to us at Vivvi, an organization that's based on finding early childcare solutions for little ones and their families. And we happen to think that this topic really goes hand in hand with everything that we try to do, in that our mission is to support the whole family so that everyone is proportionally thriving. And that means we really work hard at tapping into the specific needs parents might have and then focusing on bringing them the resources and support to help. So in this instance, we hope that you not only gain more insight on how you can empower and engage yourself and your partner emotionally and physically, but that because you're prioritizing those needs and then displaying that love and affection out in the open more actively inside the home, well, it'll actually have many positive ramifications on the little people in your family as well. So it is all as we're rowing in our oars in one direction to really help families thrive. And so with that said, I will stop, turn it over to you, Christin, and I'm so excited for you to introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about your background and why this is such an important topic to you.
Sure. Thanks, Gretchen. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm Dr. Christin Drake. I'm a psychiatrist, a general psychiatrist. I take care of people with all kinds of psychiatric difficulties, but my area of particular interest and expertise is perinatal psychiatry, meaning I take care of pregnant people who are anticipating pregnancy, pregnant people, and people through the postpartum period and in their parenting. And, this is a special area of interest for me. I couldn't agree with you more, Gretchen. Being satisfied sexually, romantically, in our partnerships or on our own is incredibly important to the thriving of individual parents and their children. It gets pushed by the wayside. I'll share with you some of the statistics and data around why. We'll explore that together. And it's important, it's well worth fighting for, to keep this front and center and keep ourselves satisfied and well.
Amazing. Yes, I'm so excited. And it's so great to talk to you again. And as you can see on our agenda, we are going to start with some of the data, really to uncover what's happening out there to not just you, but to lots of people. We'll move from the data into really talking about why does this matter? Why is this so important? And then giving you some tools, giving you some perspective, giving you some takeaways on how to preserve and build that satisfaction. Shall we go ahead?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So let's begin.
What is love? Yes. You'll notice a theme throughout the musical theme. But neuroscientists have been trying to figure this out, for ages, and to describe it appropriately. We have made some headway and understand the neurotransmitters that are relevant in lust. That sort of mindless, automatic kind of drive. It's estrogen and testosterone more than estrogen in men and women. For desire, the pleasure hormone of dopamine is highly relevant. And for bonding, it's oxytocin. In pregnancy and mainly afterward, these three areas of love and sexuality are impacted in different ways. Lust is sort of in flux, like cycling and all over the place, both in the birthing parent and the non-birthing parent, a bit difficult to get a hold of. And so for the purposes of our time together tonight, I'm going to leave lust alone and focus instead on where we see there are the most challenges biologically and externally in parents of young children, the area of desire. We really are, thinking about pleasure and desiring one another. Bonding is tricky. There's plenty of oxytocin going around, again, both in the birthing and non-birthing partner. And in some ways, this is wonderful and connecting, and in other ways, is a challenge. Is it a challenge to a couple's satisfaction and romance?
And you just started talking about like the pregnancy and the postpartum, but this is kind of ongoing. Thank goodness pregnancy and postpartum partners are here, but also into early childhood, things are a little wacky too.
Absolutely. It's highly individual how long these hormones are in flux and impacted, by choices around breastfeeding, they're impacted by proximity to our children. So family circumstances are relevant, and then our own individual biology.
I love that you just named this because I think sometimes we can feel all these things or, our bodies going one direction, our mind is going another direction, and just to be able to name it, like there are scientific reasons why this is happening, and I hope that takes away potentially guilt or, what am I doing wrong? Like what are the things that happen? So thank you for starting with science.
My pleasure. Let's take a look at the next slide and what we know happens in couples with young children. So the first slide, these data come from a study of couples in Norway, and I think it's worth saying that these were 200 couples in Norway. In Norway, there is much more support for parents than there is in the U.S. So these numbers, this is not encouraging data. This is sort of the bad news. We'll get to the good news and what we can do, how we can impact this more positively for ourselves. But I still think that this is very useful data, and that they looked at couples. This was 200 plus heterosexual couples. A limitation with a lot of this data on parents and satisfaction is that it's limited to heterosexual couples, but they included both genders in these three dimensions that I'll talk about. The first slide that you see all the way on your left, it'll be your left, is dyadic satisfaction. This is sort of how both members of the partnership are feeling about their partnership, how strong it is, how satisfying it is to them, how secure they are in it. Time one is 6 months after birth. Time two is 2 years, and time three is 8 years. So Gretchen, to your point that this is really a persistent problem and something that requires our attention throughout our children's time with us at home, really, is well taken. So it's not an emergency, it's a marathon, certainly, but requires sustained attention. So you'll see there's a precipitous decline in satisfaction in the dyad from the birth of the these are couples having their first child. From the birth of the first child, there's a rebound between years 2 and 8, but not back to the previous levels of satisfaction.
So we're starting with some bummer information for everyone. Like, stay with us because we're gonna get to a place of, okay, there's a way through this.
Absolutely, and it's just essential to know what is the normal. What it is that parents are, what we are up against, so that we can address it. We can address it.
Yeah.
The middle graph that you see is dyadic sensuality. So this is satisfaction with touching, kissing, cuddling, how much that is a part of the couple's lives, and you'll see a decline there. And then sexuality is very low. This is sex in all of its forms, whatever the couple's defined as a sexual act for them. And this is sort of stubbornly low from month 6 through 8 years.
Yeah.
I know. Let's look a little about what we're up against. I mean, it's not surprising when we think about, all of the challenges to our sensual lives and our sexual lives. So, from a purely chemical perspective, again, in the birthing partner and non-birthing partner, um, estrogen is low, can cause dysphoria, fatigue, vaginal dryness. Testosterone is also lower in male partners. Again, this is mediated by proximity to the child, almost a punishment for spending time with your kids. It's sort of a cruel thing. Um, Prolactin in people who are breastfeeding suppresses ovulation. So for some of us who are sort of dependent on ovulation for libido, for sex drive, some of us know that as a sort of previous pattern. This is a challenge. It causes breast tenderness, and if you like breast stimulation during sex, then that's a challenge. And again, vaginal dryness is here on the chart twice because it's a really very common problem that people encounter postpartum. Oxytocin, this sort of lovey-dovey hormone that is responsible for us connecting with baby, can cause a hyperfocus on baby, and also interacts with prolactin to cause some interesting breast phenomena during orgasm. We can talk about managing that later. From an emotional perspective, the challenges are a lot around change. A baby is a huge change. They're huge physical and emotional changes. So self-consciousness encompasses a lot of it. The changes in our body. When Gretchen, we were talking about, what happens to that, pregnancy, sex drive. A lot of women experience feeling really confident about their bodies, a pregnant body that's really very different than your pre-pregnancy body, but the post-pregnancy body, and this is influenced by our culture and beauty norms, can bring a lot of self-consciousness. And that kind of shift for people who are sort of self-aesthetically motivated. A lot of women are sort of their libido is driven by their own appearance because women's bodies are beautiful, and so if there's a big change, it can sort of feel like, well, where's my partner, my stimulation that comes from yourself. Mm-hmm. And then, so in addition to shifts in shape, there are shifts in function. Breasts are often the focus here. So again, people who really enjoyed their breasts as a part of their sex life, it can become uncomfortable. It can become confusing. What is the function of these breasts now if you're breastfeeding? And relatedly, the sort of, as I hinted at, the flip side of attachment, this sort of feeling of too much togetherness without breaks really is a challenge to people who relied more heavily on longing for sexual attraction. So many of us need to miss our partner, not see them very much in order to long for them and in order to desire them. And the parental leave period, this is greatly exacerbated by COVID and all of us being home together. This is a challenge for couples who had those patterns and enjoyed those patterns in their sex lives, really enjoying reuniting after a period of away.
And as far as the physical and emotional, maybe I didn't do my research. Maybe I didn't have my appropriate team supporting me in a way that I didn't even know I needed. I feel like as a birthing mother, we are so tapped into how our bodies are changing. We're reading about them. We're at the doctor. We're dialed in, but I don't know if we necessarily are aware or people are talking to us about what is, of course you're feeling this way, and of course you're feeling emotionally self-conscious, and that your shape and shift of function. I remember my 6-month week. Okay, you physically check out, like go do all the things.
Go ahead,
and,
right?
Yeah, and then I remember trying to do all the things and being like, wait a minute, no one gave me a textbook for this. So
yeah, and they're all manageable, right? Like all of the things are manageable if you had known.
Do you have a recommendation? Like, should you go to your OB? Who is that person that can be your source of truth postpartum and how to handle kind of those changes and what they mean, or at least prepare for them?
Yes, I think, and especially, from an individual perspective, I mean, some of the things that we'll talk about today are very common and the solutions are common. So there's some things that you'll learn tonight. But from an individual perspective, I'm thinking of the manner of delivery if you're the birthing parent. Like, what can you expect if you have a C-section versus a vaginal delivery? If you have a larger baby or not so large baby, if you're a smaller person, or there is a lot that your OB can talk about. But in a busy OB visit, you have to bring it up.
Right.
And obstetricians are like full of information about about this. Like, oh yeah, but an OB will tell you like, oh yeah, we'll just do this, but you have to ask.
Start writing your lists. Yeah, start writing everything down.
I think that's part of the point, that I want to make is that, prioritizing this for yourself is really half the battle. And fighting against the feeling that it's just not for this time in my life or that time in my life or the time after that, and that it will sort of happen on its own. I think this speaks to some of the external, like it's why, some of these external factors are so outrageous, because we really are up against quite enough physically and emotionally. But the high demands, the way that we parent today, we talked about this previously, is really outrageously over-focused on our kids and not on us. And intimacy and romance and sex and satisfaction in our partnerships is about us. It's for us. It's not for our partner. It's part of what we need to be well, and we are not the focus. When a baby arrives, unfortunately, we have to make ourselves the focus. I always love an opportunity. Sorry,
that you mentioned that, because we have a couple questions around so basically my date night is us doing the things that need to be done for my child, or it morphs into something else. And I can't wait till we get to kind of problem solving around things like that, because that seems to be a theme.
Mm-hmm. Yes, those questions of how to do it. Yeah. I love an opportunity to talk about how screens are the anti-sex. Like, screens just steal our time. Most couples, if you have a baby who sleeps, that's assuming you have a baby who sleeps and you're really lucky and your baby goes to bed at, 7 or 8, you really have, I'm a psychiatrist, so I think people should go to bed early. you really only have, 2 hours together before you get to, and how much time does the average person spend on their phone? More than 2 hours. So it impacts the time that you have together, steals your attention from one another. It also impacts sleep negatively, and you need energy for all of this that we have on the list here.
This is true. And also, you're going to talk about this in a second, when you boil down what you're doing throughout the day, being able to swap intimacy or swap sex for the time that you spend with a screen or with something else.
Yes, it can be done. And also, just another to say, to speak to wellness and stress, during pregnancy and shortly after giving birth, I see that smartphones actually become particularly harmful. We think about them as a tool, but, Googling every little thing that you notice is a source of stress. It attaches you to the phone, and that's not a setup for this kind of satisfaction that we're talking about. So I encourage people to please put them down.
Put them down during that 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. feeding. That is not the time to do it. From someone who made that mistake.
Yeah, it's quite stressful. And then the culture around, what is a mother supposed to want? What should she be doing? As you were talking about before, Gretchen, it wasn't on your list, to think about your own sexuality following delivery. And we get strong cultural signals for highly conflicting, that we're supposed to be sexy until we have a baby and then not. It's not a priority. So we have a lot that we're up against. Okay, let's get to the more positive.
Let's get to the good stuff. Okay, so forget it. Let's just get on our phone and look at our screen and then stay up until 2 a.m.
Yeah, so you might think, gosh, that's quite a lot. So maybe we should just wait until the kid goes to kindergarten or something. But we should not. Sex is good for us. It has all of these benefits, and it's super efficient. We'll talk more about that in a second. Having regular sex has multiple definitions for different people. But a sex life that you're satisfied with is the most reliable definition. So that if someone asks you, are you satisfied with your sex life? You would say yes without much hesitation. You get stress reduction, improved immunity. This is a funny study that comes from college students, actually. So college students who are more sexually active, you would think might have like more mono or something. They actually had stronger immune systems than those who weren't. There's a cardiovascular benefit. So reduction in heart disease for people who are satisfied with their sex lives. And then desire begets desire. So if you're struggling with low libido, having more sex and having more satisfying sex is a route to build libido. Super common after giving birth, is a low sex drive. But I often see that once people get going, they enjoy sex. It's just the sort of cues are different to get there. Sex and orgasms, especially even without intercourse, orgasms are a great pain reliever. So great for cramps, great for pelvic discomfort. Sex counts as pelvic floor rehab. So, people often go to appointments for pelvic floor rehab. And those can be incredibly helpful. Like, I think that everyone should get pelvic floor rehab, but we don't. But sex counts and orgasms count extra credit. And sex can make sleep easier. So it's good for circadian rhythms, especially evening sex. I also like, that intimacy, sensuality is a reminder of our adult priorities. It's like of the appropriate hierarchy. The partnership is the foundation of this whole thing. It's how we got here, right? That's how any of us got here. It's because of the partnership, and our individual satisfaction is the foundation, not the children. There's a question about like, is it okay? And we got a question, is it okay for me to prioritize myself and my partner over my child? And I say, absolutely it is. And it's essential. You will have to. It's the only way that you'll get what you want.
And I want to note too, we went straight to number one, which is talking about sex. And I think some of us, and we'll definitely talk about this in the next couple slides and with the Q&A, is it's like an either or. Like, how do I get to sex if I haven't even figured out how to be intimate anymore? And I want to take it all out on my partner, my frustrations, my emotions. I land it on that person because it's the easiest, or for maybe a specific
reason.
They're
the only one, yeah.
Right, they're the only one, or they didn't do the dishes, or something very, silly could just bring it into a space. And so I wonder about that tension of how do I get to sex if I can't quite get to intimacy yet? And what would you say to that?
Yeah, I would say that the conversation, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I think there is a path there to building desire, to talking about it, to prioritizing it as a couple. And sometimes it begins with conversation.
Yeah, and that conversation is actually the intimate.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely right. It is. It's a sort of like reclaiming. Even if it's, we're gonna take 10 minutes for a conversation. And this gets into, the next point about our partnerships. Like, our good partnerships, as you said, Gretchen, are good for our kids, and there are studies to support that it's good for their attachment, and then development of all kinds, language, social, academic development. So satisfied parents in partnerships are good for kids. Satisfied parents as individuals is good for kids. And we're human, so intimacy and sexual satisfaction are part of the whole. And the other thing is, sex is really efficient. It takes about 10 minutes. This is on the long end. So the average sexual encounter is 5 to 10 minutes. And
put that into perspective, you all have been so wonderful, and you're here learning, and we've been here for 30 minutes. So put that into perspective.
Yeah, that's true. You all made time for this. And I like to think about, it's a sort of call out to think about our priorities. Some of the other things that you might say, if you ask, what do you do to relieve stress and to improve your cardiovascular health and to improve how you feel about yourself? You might say, I take a Pilates class, I take a yoga class. It takes an hour of class, however long it takes to get there. Again, I think it's important to think about, so there's just the sort of irony of the time and where we commit our time. And I think it's also important to talk about how we're influenced in this way, how we spend our time by culture and expectations. I often hear, well, I'll have to get my body back in shape before I'll have sex, you know, and the expectation that there is a sort of demand for a certain type of body or a certain kind of recovery after pregnancy that is acceptable for sex, but there's no such thing. A body that desires sex deserves it, you know, and that's actually a huge win if you're having desire. It's a huge win after baby, and I hate to see how often it happens that women feel they have to sort of get in shape first.
Yeah.
Um,
I say, yeah, and I get it. I went there. So that makes sense. It's relatable.
all right, let's move on to the next slide. So let's talk about sex. This is the beginning. And I think it's worth saying that many people and many people as individuals and many couples really have never done this. So depending on, you know, your background and the way this was treated in your family and the kind of education you got, I think many of us, and maybe I'm dating myself, but are sort of pre the sex positive and pre even comprehensive sex education, like to know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And our own bodies. So this is a real challenge, Gretchen, to your point about the beginning. The conversation can feel daunting, but I will say that most of us can name at least one thing that we want sexually or from an intimate. I mean sexually broadly. Like it might be hand holding, it might be kissing, it might be standing with your arms around one another. Most of us can name that, and I think that
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I like that you have named that as like potentially sexual, because I think I maybe the other audience members out there think it's either the act of sex or
oh, that's
this,
what you're saying.
this is maybe not, like, reframing what touch and what, closeness and
Yeah.
intimacy could be. Like that could actually be a door to open.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, you don't do that with your like buddies, right? You know,
yeah.
you know, like, maybe I don't know, but that's sexual.
Yeah.
And yeah, so some ways to sort of begin this, I think, because again, some of the questions we got are like a little bit, maybe partnerships are at odds. It's really easy to get there like really quickly, like, you know, he wants sex and I don't, or he's really annoying and I'm not. And you know, and so I know you really don't, you sort of forget that you can be annoying if you're annoyed. So I think positive framing is super important, as in any, you know, any conversation that's a challenge of a couple. But I like language like, you know, I want to take care of this part of our lives. It's important to me. I really like it when we did this. I really liked it when that was a part of our lives. And I think be realistic about what's possible. But anything is a win, even just the conversation. And I think openness and curiosity can make the conversation fun. What would satisfy you? Let's try that. Sure, you know, the sort of give your partner the benefit of the doubt and be open to things.
I like that you just said anything is a win, because I think sometimes we can put so much pressure on us to get to the sex part of it, when
Yeah.
I love that you just said like asking the question is a win. So being able to have little steps in the day
Yeah.
or in the week is a great win.
I mean, this is a really fun conversation. Like asking your partner, sitting down, it's like a 5-minute conversation. What would satisfy you? It's really fun. You might hear something that surprises you. And then if you're asked to say, what would satisfy you? It's super generous. And again, it's sort of reprioritizing.
And it's also okay if you have a glass of wine while you're doing it, if that's the thing that
Yes.
you need to be comfortable.
Yes, this conversation can be had, you know, like in the tasks, we saw this in the questions too. Like there's so much to do that you can like talk and load the dishwasher. You can talk and fold the laundry. You know, these don't have to be like dressed up, makeup, babysitter at a restaurant conversations. These can happen any time and should be a part of our everyday. I love the, you know, the idea of like this is past date night, and date night just really isn't possible for a lot of us right now.
Yeah, sure. That's great.
So again, this is a critical first step of many. Like this requires our work and our attention in an ongoing way.
So talk to us about that ongoing way, please.
Sure. So yeah, right. So now what? So scheduling and routine, and a lot of people roll their eyes at this. Like when I make this, yeah, you're making the face that I get. When I make this recommendation, people are like, oh, but that's so lame. You know, we don't want to have, we don't want to have
But you
scheduled
know what?
sex.
I love this now. I did scrunch my nose, but I'm thinking about some of the questions about how, like, you get to date night, but then you're either talking about your child the whole time, or like you just date night in whatever capacity it is in your head turns into doing all of the things that need to get done. And so I do really appreciate this attention to know we're going to start to keep a routine, and here are the boundaries, like child talk, child photos, these things stay off, right? Even if
Mhm.
it's only for 30 minutes. I like that.
Yeah, whatever you've got to protect it. So sure, it's less spontaneous and maybe it's less sexy if sexy to you is the sort of like in the moment, can't keep our hands off each other, you know, gotta have it, which is, you know, realistically, it's not how most people have sex. So, but if the movie version is your thing, this is not that. But it is more reliable and it allows troubleshooting for some of the challenges that we talked about, including, you know, the physical, mainly the sort of physical, emotional, all of it, the external. So let me make my case. I'll make my
I
case
love
with
that.
an
Yeah, go for it.
okay. So say you're someone who is 6 months post birth, post giving birth, and some of you are in this range. Breastfeeding, and you and your partner are both back to work, big busy jobs, feeling pretty good physically, so that's lucky. But you're needing to do a lot of breast management. Like at 6 months, if you're working, right, you were like all and breastfeeding, you're like got your pump and boobs are like that's a big part of your life. And that's can be a real hindrance to libido. But in your pre-pregnancy life and still, you really like casual physical touch and humor. Your partner's funny, so that's good, but your only available times for sex is the evening, and most nights are totally wiped out. So let's say sex night is Thursday night. And so you have all week to prepare. I don't recommend sex night be Monday.
No.
But otherwise do what works for you.
Unless it's an add-on, and that's like the second sex night that you get to have.
Totally. Then you're winning. Yes. Yes. So you might do something early in the week that's relaxing, including declining invitations or not working out. So like just having a little bit of time for yourself. Like you might do something like take a walk around the block in order to not do some childcare. Like minimizing, you know, sort of working to retain your reserve until this time that you're going to have together to commit to the partnership and whatever your goals are for that time. I often recommend on the nights before you're going to spend time together that you tag team bedtime. So say it's Tuesday night and one partner does bedtime, the other partner does something, they can't do chores. This is a sort of like save up, a banking of energy and space, especially helpful for people who are really feeling like touched a lot by their baby, kind of or their pump and really respond nicely to a little bit of time to themselves. You'd be shocked what, you know, the 15 or 20 minutes that bedtime could do. And then switch. So it takes 2 nights to do this. So on the night that you're going to spend time together, the other person goes. It's just a little act of sort of generosity and kindness to one another. 2 people do not need to read Goodnight Moon. Just one person can read it. So on the night, you might plan for a conversation. If you're interested in sex on that night, you might plan for a conversation, talk a little bit about what you want. And maybe a cue to admire but not touch your breasts. I often recommend that to couples. And some education that sometimes milk lets down after an orgasm can remove the self-consciousness about that. Wearing something nice on top, you know, wearing lingerie can protect against that. And then a conversation, and I think people find this really very difficult sometimes, but a conversation around the fact that the physiologic fact that sometimes people who are breastfeeding need to use lubricant in a way that they hadn't before. This can be fun, you know, for a couple to figure out if you're not coming at it from the perspective of this is something to be ashamed of, or it's a signal that I don't desire my partner. Really, it's just something that happens to everyone when they're breastfeeding.
Yeah, yeah. I love it.
But you see the kind of attention it requires. Like you really have to be thinking about it. It doesn't require that you do too much. Like it doesn't take too much more time, but it does require a relentless sort of protective thought.
Yeah, I love that. Relentless protective thought.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Okay, so other tips are, and these are like in a theme that parents will appreciate. Don't keep your hands to yourself. Touch each other. Casual, everyday touch, eye contact, and more romantic touch. Like all of it is valuable and building, as you say. Like against each of those sort of factors working against our sensual lives. Just a brush past, you know, in the kitchen, sitting close together so you touch while you're reading together, while you're any opportunity, you know, to touch your partner. There's all kinds of chemical exchange and signal exchange that happens, a lot of care, and it takes like 0 seconds.
Yeah, I like that.
And then keep using your words.
Keep going.
Keep using your words, like keep talking about how things are going, maintaining the priority. Practice makes progress here in this realm, and like continuing to talk about it again can be a sort of, you know, a positively reinforcing thing. Like every time you have one of these conversations that you think is going to be kind of awkward and you don't really want to have it, like you get something good at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Better and better.
Also with a glass of wine.
Gretchen. Yeah, it can be. I mean, it really can be because of what we're taught, you know, what we're taught to say, and when we're taught to demur, like it really can be nervous making to do it. But building the skill is something I see over and over again that couples appreciate so much. Like I can't believe we weren't talking. It's so fun to talk about this part of our lives.
Yeah, because I mean, I would imagine, like you said, like this is the thing that got you to where you are.
Right, you had it.
Yeah, so you have it in you to be able
yeah
to
usually some people don't, like some people never did, you know. I think that's another thing to be, well, we can sort of, well, I think that's something to be realistic about, you know, when you think about like the level of effort that is going to be required. You know, if you had like a killer sex life before you had kids, you probably have like a certain amount of rebuilding to do. But for so many couples, sex is a challenge. Sex becomes a challenge, like with busy lives and stress even before children. So you know, this is an opportunity to sort of build back after that as well. You have to put your phones away. That's on the this is on the slides twice. You have to put your phones away. Really, and protect the time. Like put them away out of sight. They should not be in the bedroom ever, like for all kinds of mental health reasons too. Like buy an alarm clock and put your phone in your entryway. And really, like what a shame, you know, if you look back on years of a partnership and you've spent it on your phones and not together. And then one last thing I wanted to say is that to take sexual dysfunction seriously, like get help when you need it. There's so much help to be had. And sometimes the challenges that a couple is having, you know, very painful sex or erectile difficulties or inability to orgasm by any means, are things that you could talk to an obstetrician or an internist about. And there are tons of solutions that can be had that you might benefit from, and that can really really do wonders for this area. It's again something that unfortunately we often have to raise, and women especially. Like, so if there, I don't know if there are men on the call, but it's very typical in a men's, you know, wellness checkup for that man to be asked about his sexual function. How satisfied is he? How much is he having sex? Does he have any issues? And, you know, not us. So we have to raise it. But once you do, there are a lot of solutions that can be offered.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for all this. And there are definitely questions that are coming in, and I'm so proud of people. They're just getting to the nut here. So I'm going to read some of them for you. We are definitely talking about sex and
Okay.
also emotion. I think emotions and things that get in the way. And so we had one a while ago that said, what if that they or their partner is struggling to orgasm or they're afraid of pain?
Mhm.
How do you build to a place where sex is comfortable instead of stressful or frustrating?
Yeah, I think starting from whatever does feel pleasurable. That might be a massage, that might be kissing, that might be um, talking about sex, talking about what you'd like to do, sharing fantasies, whatever. And do that for a while until it feels very comfortable and you'll build desire.
Mhm.
Like I said, dopamine sort of builds dopamine. It's sort of like riding a bike through a cornfield. Like the first time you do it, it's really hard, and then you wear pathways. That's how our brains work. Like we build
Like,
these
oh, I
neurons.
get this. Yeah.
Like I can access that pathway a little more easily. So patience, if you're feeling really far away, like if sex just feels like not interesting at all and aversive, you don't want any of this to be aversive.
Mm.
Um,
And also, you're probably mentally, well, I'm sure that we all are. We are mentally putting ourselves in this expectation level to get to that place, and then we're doubly upset if we can't get there. So, kind
yeah.
of dialing back that expectation by incrementally going there.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I want to make the point that it is our lives, our sex lives and our sensual lives are worth fighting for because of all those benefits we listed. But it's, as we said, it really can be a marathon, and the marathon can be pleasurable,
Hmm.
but you have to pay attention to it. So it's easier to think about, this massage, if we make time for it a couple times a week to touch one another's bodies, and that's the end of it. You can make agreements that that's all we're going to do, and there won't be pressure for sex. Sometimes one partner or the other, you sort of have to come up with a plan for satisfaction. Sometimes one person can go off on their own. It can involve you or not involve you. But the place to begin the sort of rehabilitation is from whatever point is pleasurable for you, and stay there until you desire more, and then do that, and stay there until you desire more, and then do that.
Hmm. That's great. That's a great tip. Thank you. Um, I think there's one that's sort of similar of like just pushing through it and keep
Mm.
trying versus take a break from sex and try back later. Would you also kind of share the same philosophy around that, like incrementally?
Yes, I would say for sex, like for intercourse or oral sex, whatever it is that you're referencing there, that you feel like you need to take a break from it, but don't take a break from your intimate life. If that feels,
Can you say that again? One more for the people in the back. Don't
oh,
take
but don't take a break from your intimate life.
I love that. Can you just share more about what that means to you?
Sure. Sure. Again, it means just, keeping in physical contact. If it means if the limit is we're gonna sit on the sofa with our arms around one another while we read, that's intimate. If
Mhm.
you make a point when you're speaking to each other, this can be so challenging when you have children, and it's so basic, but making a point to look one another in the eye when you speak to each other, and don't speak while you're like cutting the kids food and tying the kids shoe, and like making face-to-face eye contact is intimate with your partner. You created a child together, so that there's heat, but there's something that goes on when you make eye contact. Compliments are intimate. Words can be intimate. Saying what you love about someone is intimate. So I think there's a lot that's very accessible that can be very intimate, and that can even be very sexy. That's not intercourse. There's, again, some of the changes that happen in our body make intercourse seem like no, thank you, fine, but don't let it, don't go into your respective corners until it's okay to have sex. As you're saying, it's not black and white. There's so much gray that's super good and fun and saucy.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, that's so great. Okay. Desire with a partner when we are always together. And I'm sure so
Yeah.
many couples are dealing with this in this COVID world where we're both working from home or there's just home. We're home a lot together.
Right.
So much together time. How it's nearly impossible to go anywhere. How do you spice it up?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I think any incremental space you can take for yourself helps, and you should count that as a win. Space can be you're in a separate room with your headphones on. Like hearing, I hear a lot of this, like hearing your partner can be so irritating right now. Like they're not even there, but you can hear them. So I think one, are
You
you
just missed it. My husband was like cutting some cheese over in the corner, and I was like, "If you're going to be making noise, get out of here." And he's like, "Oh, I'm making noise." So I feel you, people out there in the world.
yeah, the irritation is very challenging. I mean, what I often recommend is, just sort of level setting with one another. Like, hey, this is a situation that would make two people, even two people who are very in love and committed to one another, very irritated by one another's presence. And I think we hinted at this a little bit earlier, Gretchen, like you mustn't forget just because you're irritated by someone doesn't mean you're not irritating. So so it's usually both ways. There's a gendered narrative that happens around this that like women are irritated by their husbands when they're around, but like that's not true. I mean, that's not the only way that it works. But so that's good news and bad news, and that you can come together and talk about like what can we do, because this is bad news. If we're just irritated, we can't stand each other's presence, like how are we ever going to get what we want? And come up with some solutions, like I will leave at certain times just so that you can be alone. Like we often try to sort of contort our alone time into someone else's schedule. I don't know if that sounds familiar to people, but like, okay, like on Tuesday at 5:30, like no one will be home. And so but you can ask for the house,
Mhm.
if you plan around it and set it up.
And then that means coming back together is
Yeah.
where it's more powerful. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, yes, initially there's a sort of decompressing,
Yeah.
like how it feels to be alone in your home is precious and great. And so you need some of that just for sort of stress reduction. But then, yeah, if you can organize enough time, there was a question, a pre-submitted question about like when can I start prioritizing this, and like when is it okay to like be away and like ask for help or ask for childcare just for us to be together in a way. And I say as soon as possible.
Yeah.
You
Instead
know,
of your registry, think about who you can
yes,
register for time, even if
yes.
it means, so that you can get out of the house for an hour.
And so sometimes when people are so just sort of at their wits' end with their partner, like you sometimes maybe you need to use that time to spend time with other people, and then miss each other a little, wonder what's going on. But I
Yeah.
do think that talking about it together, and saying, could I have 30 minutes each day where I can like be in this room with my headphones on? That's a place to start, and that will help.
That's great, because I think that also cuts to the point of I can only have my time or sex, and I have to choose, like,
Mhm.
do I do a bath or do I do sex? And it doesn't have to be either or, depending on how you reframe it with your partner.
Yeah, and for your family, like the truth of it is, we often find ourselves like kind of coming up for air under all of these obligations, realizing that like I don't have enough time for both. Like you're saying, some of us really are in positions where we have to choose between an evening in which we take a bath or like do a deep conditioner. It's like something for ourselves that takes an hour, or talking to our partners and maybe having sex. But there's a solution to that, which is to try to give other people your responsibility, like really go looking hard, and for areas in which you can do less at home usually.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
always use the bento lunch. We talk about this, like the bento lunch as the example, and like how many people have been like completely spent at the end of a day, crazy work week, really busy, exhausted, and still you made like the harvest muffins for the snack time from scratch from the New York Times recipe. Like how many people have done that? Like you shouldn't do that. You should just not make the muffins. You should tell them they can have the carrots that are in the bag.
Well, and you also were getting to this point of oh, I lost it. About prioritizing, and I think when you do make time for your partner and yourself, and do you feel guilty about not being with your child? But hopefully, in the end of the day, even if your child is not super excited that you're saying goodbye or that you're co-parenting on a something that maybe you would do together, you're actually setting up really healthy boundaries at the same time for your child to understand that this is important and healthy.
Yes, from two perspectives, it's healthy. Like for them to see the boundaries is healthy on its own, and for you to be satisfied as an individual and in a partnership is good for them.
Yeah, I love that. On a more frustrating turn of events, oftentimes this registrant gets frustrated with their partner. Oftentimes, frustration with my partner gets in the way of wanting to be intimate. It's definitely happened before. How do you overcome this?
Yeah, I think you're going to think I'm a little bit of a broken record about this, and I'm a shrink, so everything looks like a conversation. But I think, I think, look, I do think there's a certain amount of like internal that we can work on. I think this is especially triggered in new parents of like what is important and what isn't. So having a sort of outlet of, actually that's not that important. Like these things we can get really irritated about, it's not that important. We talk about socks a lot in my practice. Like I hear a lot about socks on the floor. And so, and like socks on the floor can be really obnoxious, but is it worth it? I mean, when you think about like the person who asked that question is so smart to observe the impact that frustration has on the intimate life. So like, is it worth it to be irritated about the socks or something else in exchange for your intimate life? Probably not. All other things being pretty good. But I think that, not holding things in, speaking to them, and also understanding that partners have limitations. So like if you said pick up the socks and your partner doesn't pick up the socks, it's probably because they can't. They can't keep all the things in mind, like not because they're a jerk and they think you should pick up their socks. Like it can get sort of nasty. Our thoughts can get sort of nasty when we're exhausted. Yeah. So I think that perspective is important, like the benefit of the doubt, like to ask for the benefit of the doubt from our partners and to try to offer it whenever we have the bandwidth to can go a long way.
I love that you went there because I so thought you were going to say, well, which is something that I'm trying to really work hard with doing, is naming. I love that this was named in the chat function, and it's a really clear.
Yeah.
I wonder how the partner would receive it if you said, my frustration with you about X, Y, and Z is getting in the way of me wanting to be intimate with you. And when you put those two things together, that I want this, but this is getting in the way, maybe your partner would also be receptive in a way that they might not have heard before, because they're like, oh, well, I want that too, hopefully.
Yeah.
I never thought that socks on the floor would prevent me from, getting my socks off. Is that's
That's great. Well, yes, and I think the conversation cuts through so much. Like again, whether the socks end up picked up or not, like to have your partner say like, oh, like I get you. I get it, and I'm sorry about it, and I'll try my best. And then we have to accept that like sometimes people are just like, our loved ones are just irritating. But if they're irritating and you haven't talked about it, then it allows for all of this fantasy that's quite negative, instead of just like they have a limitation.
I love that. Meanwhile, no one's picking up the socks. We have probably time for, I would say, one more. The questions have kind of slowed in, so I'll kind of hang here in the ether for just a sec to see if we've got any last minute questions. while we are waiting, I'm so happy that we had the chance to chat about this. Clearly something that's
I am
important
too.
to people and important to all of us as humans in the long run to be thriving as families. So
Yes.
really so excited to be able to chat this through with you.
I am too. I wanted to make one more point, maybe. I hear a little bit of, or I read a little bit of this in the last couple of questions, um, this again, sort of very gendered thing that like women, like we have we have sex for someone else.
Mm.
And I really want to make the point that I hope that you all would hear in our discussion today that it really is it is for us. There's so much benefit to us, and that's another way to sort of get to that priority, to see it that way. It's not an offering to your partner. It's a it's a it's a way to be more satisfied ourselves.
I'm not going to even say anything more. That was a beautiful way to wrap it up. Thank you for allowing us to create a little bit more space to think about ourselves, as well as give us some data points and give us some solid takeaways that we can apply tomorrow, tonight, even. But
Maybe tonight.
future. Christin, it's always so wonderful to talk to you.
You too.
Registrants, it's so great that you were here tonight. I know the Hatch team will be following up with you with more resources, but I hope you have a wonderful night, and thank you so much again for being here.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.